Right, we're going out for a little ride on this G12 CSR this morning. We have been out on it before. I'll tell you a little bit about why we're out on it this morning. So we'll get off and we'll have a little natter about it. You notice oil pressure straight up to 60, 70 psi, somewhere around there. Anyway, we're away. If you're looking at oil pressure, we're just short of 80 psi, and I'll explain why we're on about oil pressure as we go. I'm a bit steady with old lass, I'm running it in. Last year, I'll start again. It's always past oil pump when it's stood for any length of time. Most of the oil ends up down its sump. Common thing on British bikes, particularly if they've got gear pumps, make times out bad because they tend to use a plunger pump. And if they're doing it, there's something wrong. But anyway, I got fed up with it and I put a tap in line. As you can see, I've got a oil tap in middle at speedo. Anyway, I jumped on it one morning, rid over to my mum's, and forgot to turn oil tap on. So, of course, it run short of oil. And even though when I turned it on and it was running, it had still got reasonable oil pressure, I thought, I better have a look. So through winter months I pulled the engine out, stripped it down, had a look, and to be quite honest, it scuffed shells, so I thought I'll change shells. Measured everything up anyway. There were a couple of quite heavy scores in it, to be honest. So we decided I'd grind it, and while I was doing it I had centre journal done, which I didn't really want to have done, but anyway, it required it. While I was in engine, I found a broken gudgeon pin. I mean, engine run perfectly quiet, there was no noise out of it, I don't like that. Anyway, I'd got a spare set of pistons and I thought I'll use them pistons. And there were proper Alcam pistons. Now, it was a long time since I built this bike, so I couldn't remember exactly. I knew the pistons were Alcam pistons, but I didn't realise that Alcam must have been taken over by AE, because the newer pistons I had were Alcam, but they were also stamped with AE inside them, or it was casting anyway. But I thought, oh, they'll be alright, and then I weighed them and they were a bit heavier, and I thought, because if you get the JP pistons, which are quite heavy, I think it's JP anyway, they don't run the same with heavy pistons in. Anyway, I thought, oh, they'll be alright, I'll send them and use them. Anyway, crank and cylinders went off to Rebo place, the engineering works. I always use Blands at Barnsley. They are very good. Anyway, he ground the crank. I ordered the new shells, that wasn't a cheap affair. And I think centre journal shells were about 80 quid. Big end shells were cheap enough. I mean, imagine the centre journal shells I had to get from Jampot Club. I couldn't find them anywhere else, so I had to joint club them. buying from there. Now I told him to bore them so these new pistons had it boxed, and luckily he measured the pistons. I bought them off a fella who died, and they were in his stock of stuff, and there were 40s and mine had 20s in. No, mine was standard. It never been bored, but because I had the 40s I would have gone straight to 40. Anyway, luckily Bland's measured the pistons, and one piston were different to other. I think at some time somebody had tried to machine these pistons from a 40 or one-up pistons to a 20, so there were 2 odd pistons. Luckily he hadn't bored it, and he measured both pistons. Anyway, they're still stood hot shelf. It quickly opened cylinders, and I put a new set of rings on it, so it's still on the standard bore with a new set of rings in. I mean, it's not bad, its cylinder, but you know, it's not 100%, it's about 80%, but it's still got the Alcam pistons, which if you put the other pistons in, everybody says it spoils these bikes unless you balance the crank to suit the pistons. Anyway, that was that done. Reshelled it, put it together, and while I were on with it, there's 3 different types of oil filters fitted to these bikes. One was a brass mesh with a fine brass mesh over the top, which they tended to have a lot of trouble. It would collapse and stop the oil altogether. So Matchless recommended that you remove the outer finer mesh and just leave the coarse mesh. Well, that's what this bike had in. But then they went to felt filter stitched over the coarse mesh, so I thought, yeah, that's what I'll do. So I made that filter up, and just watch it, car behind me stuck up my ass. So that's what's in it. Anyway, getting on to the story of oil now, or oil pressure. When you first start it, it stacks it straight up to 70-80 psi, ticking over, or just up tick over. As she runs and warms up, the oil pressure drops off. Obviously, perfectly normal, but it drops off a little bit more than what I like. I mean, we've probably done, I don't know, 7 miles now, and we're down at 50 psi with plenty of revs on. We're doing 50 miles an hour, it's 50 psi. Oil still won't be warm. This bike will probably want to do, I don't know, 12 miles before oil tank's warm, or fully warm. Now, when it gets really hot, this bike's got about, if you're running down the road, 35-40 psi, which I believe with manufacturers they reckon it shouldn't ever fall below 30. So technically speaking, it's alright. I took all the play out of the pump. I know all the shells, all the big ends, the journals are absolutely spot on. Now the only thing what's changed on it is I'm using a different oil from what I used last year, and it's now got the felt filter in. Unfortunately, I'd have to destroy this filter to I'm just keeping me out of traffic. I'd have to destroy this filter to try it without the felt on, to see if it increased the flow rate, which would up the pressure a little. Not optimistic that'd work anyway. The other thing is the oil. I always used oil from let me think, it was a Buzz Townsend off that car programme. He opened an oil shop up, I think it's called Classic Oils. Now it's his oil I was running last year. Now I can't remember whose this is, but it's somebody different. and I'm wondering if viscosity is less at 100 degrees, you know, so it's not quite as viscous. So when I've done a few miles on it, I'll change oil to something different. I'll get another gallon at Classic Oils and see if it was that what made difference. I spoke to quite a few lads and they say don't worry about it. If it's got oil pressure it'll be alright, but you know what it's like. I mean, particularly this bike, because it's a bit sentimental. It was my dad's. Being in family, well, I don't know. My dad had it when I was a teenager, so I don't know how long that is since, but it's a long while. So, you know, I really don't want to pull engine in bits again. I don't know what else to do with it, to be honest. I mean, not only did Bland's, I mean, he's done loads of stuff for me. They do a fantastic job, so I'm pretty confident his work will be alright. I know the shells were alright, because we did have a little problem with it and it went back. And he measured everything up again. I put a couple of rods on and it was a bit tight. And it turned out that it was the side clearance. If you look at what would be the corner of the shell, the original shells were chamfered at 45 degrees. And the new shells didn't have as much chamfer on. And top and tail of it is well, the chamfer on the side, what were causing it to bind a little bit in the radius. Because I'd specified to him what radius I wanted in corners, and I said it were quite important that I had the radius because, you know, the reputed crank problems with these. Anyway, he showed me radius were bang on with a radius gauge, you know, I mean, it was as near as human eye could see. The ground tool took radius gauge to grind it with curves in. Anyway, what we did was we just pulled the scraper out corner at shells to knock the sharp corner off, and it immediately freed the rods up, so it was binding up radius as in corner, top and tail of it. Anyway, the rods had fall under their own weight, which is, you know, as good as you're going to get sort of thing. And when I put crank in engine and built engine up, you could turn it over quite nicely really, because I think this is only one I've worked on, but I understand that it would be a bit awkward. I've heard people saying about, you know, leave the centre web slack, and when I say slack, just off slack, assemble the crankcases, roll the crank round, split it back up and then tighten the centre web. But this, you cannot move the centre web. If the centre web sat on the 6 bolts and the recess in the crankshaft, in the crankcase, there's no room to move that about, so that wasn't the issue, or not what I could see anyway. So anyway, I suppose my big problem was fitting an oil pressure gauge, because once you can see it, it peeves you. I've probably done 10 mile and she got 20, just below 20 psi ticking over, and that's assuming gauge is accurate. I'll show you how I put the gauge on. I'll just bob her on stand, we'll stop here in a minute. What I did was machined a new filter housing, filter cap with a filter attached to it, put an elbow on end. Top and tail of it is it's machined with an extra piece on with an 1/8 BSP thread in it, put an elbow in it, plastic pipe up here, runs up to gauge, and I've mounted gauge under the steering damper just like that. Works perfectly alright. I don't think it bothered pipe turning with headstock. I managed to find original bacon slicer mudguard, number plate. They were in garage, chucked in a box. Why they were chucked in a box I've no idea. I must not have re-put them back on when I built it in the first place. It had some fall on it and it bent this over and tore big holes in original mudguard. So this is new mudguards. I've done 190 mile on it now since I rebuilt engine, so it's still settling down. I don't know what to say about oil pressure. It is what it is, and I think I'm just going to let it run and keep my eye on it. Obviously when I've done 500 mile I'll change oil, put some oil in which I used last year, which were classic oils, in case there's a difference in viscosity. See what that does. Look at that, it looks like some bloody swines dumped all the old engine oil in lay-by. You couldn't make it up. Anyway, it is what it is. That's my little matchless. Anyway, we'll push on a bit further. I'm off down to squires. It looks like gearboxes leaking from back at kickstart shaft. Coming on to exhaust. Maybe winter I might take it out. I think on my Norton I've machined it out and put a X-ring seal in there, so I might do the same with this. Anyway, we'll get off down to squires for a cup of tea. Oh. I'll explain what. When I rebuilt it, I retyped mag obviously because I had engine out, and I've put it in a slightly different place, and just out of force of habit I always put it in the same position as pre-rebuild, and it's obviously not just where it was, and the bugger kicks back. Oh. The contrary little git. I don't know if you caught what I did there. I think the button on the end of the mag, it's got an earthing button on the end of the mag. I think the button had stayed in instead of popping back out. So the earthing mag out, that's why she wouldn't start. Anyway, you've heard all my woes about this bike. Hopefully it should turn out wash alright. I might have another bike to bring out next week. I've just built a Tiger 100C coming from America. I got the logbook for it yesterday, so I've sent it away for a number plate making. I'll bob it on insurance, get some tax on it, and we'll have a run out on that next week, see what it's like. Hopefully that'll be okay. Anyway, we're down at Squires now, so thanks for coming along for the ride, and we'll see you up next ride out. Good night, Steve.